Evie Sullivan has been a board member like longer than I can remember, and it's actually longer than she can remember. But she was also treasurer for the Santa Barbara County Republican Party. She was on the Central Committee. How long ago was that, Evie? So we want to recognize all of her contributions for all the decades of work that she's done. She was the treasurer for the Republic, for this board here for many, many years, and as well as the Central Committee. And we just want to thank her and show our appreciation. So here's a little token.
I've known Evie since, well, probably the 70s, when I was invited to join the Gals Club. Are there any people in this room that even know what the Gals Club is? Oh, you know Rita. That's good. The Gals Club was a club that was started, I think, in the 1960s. And their name stood for Gather at Lunch and Study. Gals. And years ago, when Rush Limbaugh used to have his radio show, he liked to make fun of the gals. And every time he did, we'd chuckle. The advertisement. Evie was, of course, one of the members, and her dear friend was Ellie Wyatt. Evie and Ellie were always together, and I was honored when Evie and Ellie asked me to join the Gals Club, because, you know, my mother was a member of the Federation, and she thought that was really quite an honor to be in the Gals Club. So, and I was totally honored when Evie, I mean, I look up to her. She's taught me everything I know. A wonderful lady, fabulous, fabulous friend.
Take the cherry out.
We honor you today.
Okay, next we'll have Nick Sebastian, our Flex Vice President, introduce Andy Caldwell.
Okay, and here we go. I'm going to start off with an apology to everyone. I'm here today. I had a problem last week with the microphone, so I put a plug-in one in there to get by that day. That was miserable. I had to agree. So man, I was all set up this morning. I had new batteries for the other ones, and 2 microphones and everything, and I went down to my office down in Seaside. It was on the shelf. I checked it out. I brought the big unit in, and now I've been looking all over this room like I'm sure that I brought that bag, thinking that when we come in we have our meeting, our board meeting and all, and move around, not to be found. So anyway, the other side of what happened too, which is really cool, is that Thomas Cole, who's here today, running for office, he called his son Charlie Cole, who came out from Summerlin to bring this. So that was great, very much appreciated. So, yeah, thank you everybody. So next week, y'all have my phone number. Call me and say, did you get the mic in the car? God darn it. Anyway, we had a really great election. People worked hard on that. I'm talking about the local things and the others, but you know, I'm most proud of the different races for committee, for central committee, for people that you know, won, and people that worked hard in an attempt to win. There was a lot of activity, so I'm really thrilled with what went on, and congratulations to everyone.
Including you, Nick.
Oh, I wasn't going to say it, but, you know, you forced me to say I came in number 1. Who said that? All right, I said it. Okay, now, you know, I actually, okay, now on to Andy. We have a large gathering here today because everybody knows Andy. I would say everybody, really. He plays such an important role, I'm not even going to read this stuff. And so it just goes without saying what he means to this community and the related organization. You know, he's the executive director of CoLab. There's a great event coming up in April that I hope you will, it's in the Wave. It's been published in the Wave as an event for a number of weeks now, that it's coming up April 11th, I think? 27th, thanks Andy. And so, you know, get your reservations in, it's a really great time, and great location of the shoe match there, so we have a good time. Catch it again on the Wave and sign up if you can, make it that night. So anyway, and so I was going to say, you know, Andy's a great family man. I was going to say he has a bunch of kids. He does have a bunch of kids, and I thought this morning, well, a bunch is 12. So I wanted to verify this morning, and I did look on his website. So he has half a bunch minus one. He's got 5 kids. So he's 7. Oh my gosh, correct me now. Okay, I'm stepping down. Let's let Andy speak. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me again. It's been a while since I've been down here, speaking to you, that is. For those of you that don't know me, the organization I work for is the Coalition of Labor, Agriculture, and Business. We started that organization 33 years ago, and it primarily served as a government watchdog and a business advocate. And we started a radio show and newspaper columns as an adjunct to that to try to get the word out to people, because the quote-unquote mainstream media just didn't cover very many issues. And why county government? County government is bigger than all the city governments combined in the region. And they are an arm of the state and federal government for programs that are county-wide, not just in the incorporated area. So the county has about 4,500 employees, $1.5 billion budget, and county-wide they do flood control, district attorney, the jail, social services, public health, alcohol, drug, and mental health services. They do all of that county-wide. Most of that is an extension of state and federal government, but then they have their own functions in the unincorporated areas. And way back when we started, the Board of Supervisors was also the board of the Air Pollution Control District. Now that district's been created and changed so that it's now a function of all 5 county supervisors and a representative for each city. Well, the bottom line here is all of this affects our economy and the ability of our economy to grow. And right now, you're in the throes of the biggest change that's going to happen to this South County in ever. And I'm going to explain a little bit about this to you because a lot of people don't know what's going on. So for a couple of decades, there was a program called, it's called RHNA, R-H-N-A, and I think it's Regional Housing Needs Assessment or something like that, or Authority. And what this was, it was a state plan where the state looked at communities that were not willing to grow. And for years, Santa Barbara was no growth, Montecito was still no growth, the county was no growth, so they started saying every community, you've got to build your fair share. So if you had 100,000 people in your community, you had to grow from 3 to 5% over time, things like that. They had a changing target, but the program or the mandate never had any teeth in it. So they would just pretend to plan for growth, but there was never any growth. Well, a couple of years ago, because of the housing crises in the state of California, they put teeth in it. So now as cities and counties do not allocate this growth and create this growth, they'll be fined tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars And if that doesn't work, the state will take over the planning department of that entity. And they also created what's called a builder's remedy, that if the state doesn't allocate the growth, or I mean the local jurisdiction doesn't zone for the growth, they will give a builder who complies and comports with the requirements over-the-counter permit to build pretty much whatever the hell they want. And when I say whatever the hell they want, if it's affordable and near a transit line, they don't have to include parking. And we're starting to see these things pop up, buildings with no parking. And in the heart of Santa Maria, the old heart of Santa Maria is Main and Broadway. 4 lanes go in all 4 directions. They're building a 3 to 4 story building on a site that used to have a gas station. Okay, it's stack and pack. I call it stack and pack, jam and cram, high density units, right? There's no parking. So I asked somebody from the city, where are they supposed to park? They're supposed to walk cross the boulevard twice, walk a half block down and park in the mall parking lot. That's the plan.
That's true.
So Macy's, I don't know, Dale, you're probably up on this more, that where they're supposed to put 800 units at Macy's in the parking lot. And that's just for starters. And they're going to destroy this community. There is no way about it, because you already have not enough water and too much traffic, okay? And most neighborhoods don't have enough parking. So they're allowing people to put ADUs, accessory dwelling units, in backyards. And then they're allowing the height limitation. Santa Barbara, going back, I think it was to Pearl Chase, said we're not going to block the views of the ocean, and we're not going to block the views of the mountain. Well, now they are literally talking about 7-story buildings in Santa Barbara. Now here's the deal. On the one hand, we say we can't do anything about it, but you've got a state assemblyman and a state senator down here that voted for this stuff. And I just think the community, I've never been pro-growth or anti-growth. I'm more pro-private property rights. And my problem down here is you don't have your own water source. Except for the fact you have a rinky-dink desal plant, and you have some state water, and you have some Cachuma water, but it's not enough. It's not enough. And the point here is all of this growth is without the state lifting one finger for the infrastructure. Water, sewage, traffic, and all the rest.
Trash.
Schools as well, all of that stuff. And you know, the bottom line here is I've lived in this region now for almost 56 years. And one of the things I know about Santa Barbara is the demand to live here is worldwide. The ability to afford it is worldwide, so to speak. And so when they have these notions to make Santa Barbara affordable, the only way they can do that is by total control of the housing market and limiting who can rent and who could buy. And I don't think it's going to work. It usually doesn't work. And there's people trying to put rent control on the ballot in this November. I think maybe it's already on the ballot. As one of my friends says, I have on the show every week, that's like carpet bombing a community because rent control doesn't work. People will end up selling whatever they have, converting what they have, and or neglecting what they have because of the limit on rent control. And then plus, people will never move out of those rent control units. There will be no turnover. And in fact, in places in San Francisco, at one time, upwards of 20 to 30% of the units in San Francisco were empty because people were just keeping them because there was rent control, and they didn't want to rent it to somebody else because they couldn't get them out of there. So it's just a disaster. So that RENA program is huge, and people should be screaming bloody murder at Greg Hart and Monique Limon right now, and telling them this is destroying. And again, I'm not against affordable housing, and I'm not against growth. But if the state's not going to build more dams or reservoirs and another state water project, et cetera, they're flushing. We do not even have a water shortage problem. We have a man-made water crisis because they're releasing up to 40% of the water we have in storage. They release to the ocean for fish passage and fish habitat. And so anyway, the whole thing's screwed up, right? Of course, you're Republicans, so you already know that. So let me tell you one of the reasons I believe this board, I've been doing this 33 years, I've seen over 25 supervisors come and go. This current board I'm working with is the worst I've ever seen. And that includes who I used to call the Twisted Sisters. You remember the Twisted Sisters? Marshall, Schwartz, and Rose. And part of the reason is because of the ARPA money and other funds, between the state and federal government dumped $100 million on their lap and said, do whatever the heck you want. One of the things they did is start trying to create these homeless hut villages to help the homeless out. And I'm not against helping the homeless out, but the fact is they're spending millions of dollars. And they're actually, for instance, bought the Super 8 motel, took it off tax rolls. They bought a sorority house, IV, took it off the tax rolls. They tried to buy a Motel 6 in Santa Maria. We kind of blocked it by just exposing it. And the point here is that those people have to be willing to be helped. There's low-hanging fruit. There's people that are homeless through no fault of their own. You give them a leg up, they're going to reintegrate into society and be fine. There's some people, they had cancer, lost everything, or a husband left the family and left them with nothing. Those people can be helped really easy. But when you have alcohol, drug, and mental health programs, including dual diagnosis, there's no easy fix there, especially if the person is drug addicted, alcohol addicted, mentally ill, and doesn't want to be helped. It's a huge crisis. And the only reason they're really pushing it down here is those homeless people keep lighting the South County on fire, right? And so they're trying to get them out of the rivers and creeks and along the freeways and bushes and all that sort of stuff. But they're throwing money at it like there's no tomorrow, even though they will eventually run out of money. Because that federal money's drying up and the state's got a huge budget deficit, that's going to dry up. So that's kind of a big picture, but here's a couple of the issues. How many of you followed this ambulance crisis that we exposed? So the thing here is, AMR's had the ambulance contract here for decades, and they get rated and graded on everything they do, right? The way the system is set up is you have a state emergency management service agency, and then the county has a local emergency management group that a doctor and a professional in the business sector, they rate. Did the ambulance show up on time? Did they have the right equipment? Did they treat the person correctly? Did they get them to the hospital quick enough? And all that stuff. And AMR always passed, so they got contract renewals. Well, County Fire wanted the job and they wanted the money. But it's the money on steroids. Somebody changed a Medicare law that allows County Fire to charge 3 times more than AMR can on an ambulance call paid for by Medicare. And the county was going to siphon that money off and do all these other things with it. And so they had this plan that they really do consider themselves demigods. And they figured, we're going to compete for that ambulance contract and we're going to get that ambulance contract. And so what they did is the county put it out to bid for the first time in a long time. And at the beginning, the county set this thing up right. They did it right. They hired an independent consultant to set up what's called a request for proposal, i.e. here's the program, bid on it. So AMR and County Fire bid on it, and then they hired 3 independent people from across the country to review the proposals. Well, County Fire was so sure they were going to get this. They went out and bought 30 ambulances before the contract was even awarded. But they did it secretly. They hid them on Vandenberg Air Force Base. We got photos of it and exposed the whole thing. Because we kept hearing from people in the county they bought the ambulances. We said, how could they have done that? It has never been approved by the board. Because I read the agenda every week. It was never approved by the board. It got signed off by purchasing director, auditor, controller. They bought them and it never got board approval. And we've asked for we did a Freedom of California Public Records Act request on that question. They never have answered that question, even with our Public Records Act. So they hid them out there, and the reason we know we hid them is somebody said, what are these doing here? And the guy goes, these are county ambulances, but nobody's supposed to know that. So we exposed it, and anyway, then the funniest thing in the world happened. Am I hearing voices? Okay. The funniest thing happened, AMR won the bid.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So County Fire starts screaming bloody murder. They file an appeal, they file a protest, and these are internal county people denied them, said, AMR won this fair and square, you lost, get over it. Well, then the County Fire Chiefs Association, because they're all in the same bed together, they go to the Board of Supervisors and they say, cancel the contract and let us share the contract with AMR. So the board says, okay, we're going to go out to a permit system. And in the permit system, AMR, the staff said AMR's qualified for a permit, County Fire's qualified for a permit. The board has the hearing and they pick County Fire only, even though it's supposed to be shared. The whole thing's as dirty as it can be. As dirty politics as I've ever seen in this county. Well, then AMR sued, and they won a preliminary injunction against the county. The judge looked at the efforts. The State Emergency Management System wrote a letter. The State Attorney General wrote a letter saying this thing stinks to high heaven. And the judge said, on the merit, what I see here, it looks like AMR is going to prevail. So they prevented the county from getting that they were supposed to start ambulance services on March 1st. Well, so now, you want to know how dirty the politics are down here? Greg Hart has now put in a bill, a gut-and-amend bill, because one of the reasons the state got involved and the Attorney General got involved and the judge ruled against them is the decision, the people that are supposed to be oversee ambulances is this Emergency Management Service Agency and the medical director. In other words, overseeing an ambulance contract is supposed to be a medical decision, medical oversight, and in statutory requirements. It's not supposed to be a political decision. So the judge and the state agency attorney general said the board's not supposed to override what their own staff determined through a fair and impartial process. So Greg Hart's put a bill in to say that that agency is now subject to the Board of Supervisors. This is how dirty this is. Now, I don't think that's going to affect the contract or the court case right now, but what I expect to happen is the county should lose, but they'll come back, cancel what they did before, and then go back to this sharing agreement, and then figure out some way to ace out AMR. And so that's one of the things. So the other big boondoggle, this is the biggest boondoggle I've seen in my 33 years. So down the road here you have what's called the Tahiguas landfill. And the Tahiguas landfill is the county dump, and some of the San Ynez Valley uses that dump as well. Santa Barbara uses it, Goleta uses it. And it's been there for decades. Well, the environmentalists always wanted that thing shut down. They don't want to dump on the coast. And so the lefty supervisors, green virtue signaling. So, okay, well, what we're going to do, and this started back with Gail Marshall. Gail Marshall went to Germany with staff to look at their high-tech waste processes. And eventually the board decided to build this resource center. So what it is it's supposed to be this very state-of-the-art recycling diversion program where the trash comes in, they pick out the lumber, they pick out the paper and the cardboard and the glass and the whatever else that can be recycled. And then what's left is organic food waste, green waste, and it goes into this anaerobic biodigester where these bugs eat the organic material and they literally pass gas, and that gas is collected and goes straight into a Southern California gas pipeline. Well, that's how it's supposed to work on paper. Okay? But let me tell you what's really going. Oh, and one of the other byproducts is compost. Problem number one, China quit taking our recyclables. It collapsed the entire recyclable market in the United States. Totally collapsed it. So then now almost everything you're putting in that blue can is ending up in the dump.
Oh no.
Okay, there's still some stuff they can sell, but the price fell out and there's nobody that wants to buy it. Nobody wants to try to process it. So this is the huge elephant in the room, and they don't want to talk about it. Number two, somehow their process is so screwed up that the compost is contaminated. They can't sell it to any farmers or ranchers or landscapers because it's probably got glass and plastic and God knows what else in it. So they're hauling it down somewhere to Ventura County, and I don't know what they're doing with it. And then the biodigester's not working. I don't know, I think the bugs have gas. I don't know what's going on there. But let me tell you why this is a problem. They financed that thing. It's $250 million. Okay, and what it was supposed to do, so there's this thing called a tip fee. When you go to take a load of junk to the dump, they charge you a fee. And every time a trash truck goes across that and dumps there, that fee is triggered. Whether it's from the San Ynez Valley or Santa Barbara, Goleta, whoever's hauling it, and then that fee gets charged to the ratepayers. Well, they use that fee for closure costs, right? And operating, maintenance, and closure costs for the dump. Well, their idea was, we're going to divert so much trash, we won't have to close that landfill for X number of years. We're going to buy space that's left in the landfill for X number of years, and then we'll pay off the digester, and then eventually we'll probably get another landfill, or maybe we'll go to Santa Maria or whatever. That was the plan. Well, the landfill is now slated to fill up in 2 years, not 14 years, because of the recyclables and the problems they're having. So literally, they admitted this. They didn't talk about it, and the press didn't bother covering it. They literally said, we've got to expand Tehiquis now to keep the money coming in to pay off the digester. And you know, the enviros, even a guy named Paul Rellis, who started the Community Environmental Council, so all these people early on said, this thing is way too complicated. He was representing a company that could do it cheaper and easier, and the board blew him off. They went for the ultimate green deal, and now they've got a big boondoggle on their hands. And they just this last week voted to extend the life of that landfill till 2038, I think, because that's going to be how long. So, in other words, if the bottom line here, if that digester continues to fail, you're going to end up paying double the trash rates down here, because you're going to have to pay for the digester, and you're going to have to pay for them to haul it somewhere else, and pay the tip fee for that other dump. And again, this board, they don't come out and talk about their failures. If you have a politician come in here, even a conservative one, they're going to tell you all the things they're doing great. They're the biggest screw-ups I've seen in 33 years. So now I'm going to tell you about another kind of screw-up. 3rd district race. Now, I know where the exit is. So I know where the exit is, but unfortunately I parked in the front. So let's talk about the 1st district first. All right. Joss, I told my board this 3 to 6 months ago, that there was a slight possibility that a perfect storm was going to hit the 1st district. That perfect storm has several constituent parts. Number one, people are still ticked off about marijuana in the 1st district. Now, Steve Lavanino and Doss Williams own the marijuana problem. They are the original Doobie Brothers of the Santa Barbara County, okay? And let me tell you the problem there, and it's a huge problem. So I was at a hearing where the Board of Supervisors brought in a consultant who was the #1 expert in the state of California on marijuana. Now back then there was 2 kinds of marijuana markets. One of them was the black market, the illegal pot market that lives to this day. The other one was medical marijuana. But again, the state was going to okay recreational marijuana, and so they were having this hearing, and the guy told them point blank, you are proposing to permit so many hundreds of acres of marijuana grow that all by yourself you will be able to satisfy the entire demand of the state of California. In other words, if you grow this much pot and anybody else grows that much pot, you're going to collapse the market. They did it anyway. Now the black market's still going, and of course it's cheaper than going through the county permit, but we are the largest pot growers in the state, and we help collapse the market and stink up the neighborhood besides. So marijuana, people were mad about that. Number 2, Doss Williams was a political upstart. Okay, a kid grew up under some difficult circumstances, was actually living in his car at one time, but he was politically savvy, very charismatic, smart kid, and one of the things he did is he challenged Janet Wolf when she ran for office as county supervisor way back when. Well, Janet Wolf is part of the Santa Barbara Women's Political Committee. That is a machine in Santa Barbara. It's a machine. It's been a machine going back 20 to 30 years. Naomi Schwartz and Susan Rose and Laura Capps were all part of this club. And that club got control politics somehow in some way in the South County. You broke that machine when you got elected, and a few other people did too, but for the most part, they control politics, and if Doss Williams challenged that machine, shame on you, you're dead to us. Right? So they've been gunning for him for a long time. That Laura Capps challenged him the last election cycle and came close to beating him. But then with redistricting, she gets the 2nd district. Well, Laura Capps, every time marijuana comes up in that board, she goes after Doss, and Steve Lavanino defends Doss. It happens every time. But they're still going after him. Well, then Jim Buckley sold the Montecito Journal. Sarah Miller McCune is one of the financiers of this Women's Political Committee and all the South County Dems. She's part owner of that. And the gal that's the publisher of that is in that Women's Political Committee. So they're going after Doss. Then Mike Stoker and Brooks Firestone did a mailer to Republicans in that district saying vote for Roy Lee. And then Roy Lee is a Carpinteria councilman, business owner, and a nice guy. And he worked really hard. So all of those stars lined up and Doss lost. And it was somewhat of a miracle because Doss is considered a political prodigy.
Yeah.
And he lost. And nobody saw that coming. But to the tune that the person that he hires on his staff and that runs the Democratic political committee, the #1 Democratic consultant, went to work for Jones' campaign because they were worried about the third instead of the first. So in a sense, Doss got rope-a-doped, okay? And I expect Roy to not be a political hardcore ideologue, but he's still a Democrat. So that's the good news. Every single thing that went right in the first district went wrong in the third. Everything went wrong in the third. That third district race is the biggest disaster, political disaster I've seen in my 33 years. And this is where I'm gonna might have to make a beeline out the door. Okay, you have to blame the majority of it on the candidate. Okay, there's no ands, ifs, or buts. You got to blame the majority on the candidate. However, in this case, what I was told by him on not more than one occasion, he got recruited. Bob Nelson, GOP. You cannot stop this. For the last 20 to 30 years, somebody that's run for Congress or Assembly or Senate overall usually comes to talk to me, and I ask them, how much money can you raise? They say, well, we want you to raise the money. And I said, we can maybe help you, but that's on you. Unless we recruited you, whoever recruited you has to help you raise the money, has to help you hire staff, has to help you get volunteers, etc., etc. Complete, total failure. To the point. Frank told me over 35, the first day when we got the numbers, over 3,500 Republicans voted for either Joyce or Janelle. 3,500. Why in the hell couldn't the GOP get the GOP to vote for the GOP? I hate to tell you that, that's on you. It's on me to a certain degree, but here's my problem. So I met Frank. I like Frank. I think Frank could have made a great supervisor. But when we saw he couldn't raise any money and we saw he wasn't working, where did that leave us? If we would have recruited somebody, we would have been accused of splitting the Republican vote and sentencing that whole thing to doom and failure by splitting the baby and letting Joan. Our hands are tied. Did anybody in the Republican Party come and ask us if we could raise money or would raise money for him? We raised, for Susan Rose, we raised $50,000 in one day in an event at a fake location. My campaign, I raised $1.3 million against, a multiple incumbent. The money wasn't the problem, it's the horse in the race. The horse in the race has to be able to convince people he can win, and two, he'll do a good job if he wins. None of that happened. Now, I actually approached Janelle Osborne over a year ago. Why? It would be the largest city in the 3rd district, city council person, mayor of Lompoc. She wasn't interested. The only reason she got interested, go back to Rena. Lompoc tried to annex land to satisfy the arena numbers, and Joan Hartman blocked it. Janelle Osborne only ran against Joan Hartman to say, screw you. That was the only, she raised less money than Frank. She probably got less votes than Frank, even though she was a mayor. That too was pathetic. That we stayed out of the race. I mean, I told people to vote for Frank. I emailed people to donate to Frank, but there was no Frank there. There was no Frank there.
You know what with the redistricting, you know the voter registration ratio is, Republican to Democrat, in the current 3rd district?
No. He asked, do I know what the registration is? I don't, but what I do know is 40% of the voters had never voted for Joan. It was a new district, and it was winnable. Now, Galita gonna vote Democrat. Lompoc and San Ynez, a little bit mixed. But the bottom line is, you could have talked about the ambulance contract, you could have talked about Tahiguas, you could have talked about the fact that they're $1.7 billion in the hole. There's all sorts of issues. There's a sewer line that Jones tried to shove down the throat of Los Olivos that nobody could afford. There were gazillions of issues. And Lompoc's got 30% of all the Section 8 housing in the county. That little town got 40,000 people out of 450,000, and they got 30% of the Section 8 housing, no jobs. Between 2010 and 2020, Lompoc created 0 jobs. There was a bazillion issues to run on. Our goal was to get Isla Vista out of the 3rd district. We did that. The plan that won was our plan. We got it out of there. We paid a lot of money. We sued the county, did all sorts of stuff, but we did our job, and then the rest, it was a complete, total, colossal failure. And I hope to never see that again in my life. But again, you know what would have happened if we would have come out and like I said, Frank's a good guy, but Frank's not running a good campaign. We want so-and-so. The GOP establishment would have screamed bloody murder that we're gonna just, thwart the chances of anything. Because if you split the Republican vote, you lose. Especially with an independent running, you can't win because you have to win outright. You either have to win outright or go to a runoff, and the incumbent like that is always going to get 30 to 40% of the vote minimum, and probably again over 50%. And anyway, I just that thing just killed me, and luckily, and again it was luck, if not a miracle. DOS is gone. It's no mas DOS in the 1st district, and so it's not an entire disaster. But you know what? We could have potentially, and again, it's hard. Let me back up here. It's hard to find people to run for office. Okay. So I don't want to gloss over that like it's easy to find people to run. It's hard. But the fact is you cannot, and I've seen this over and over and over again, you can't just find a warm body with an R next to its name. So I'll tell you, like for instance, in Michelle Westlander Quaid. Now, Michelle Westlander Quaid, smart as they come. She could be a great congressperson. But she didn't have the greatest campaign either. And then the doctor, what was the doctor's name?
Brad Allen.
Brad Allen would have been a better congressman than me. Okay? Smarter than me. No, just a great guy. Now, so I had lunch with them. And I said, Brad, he goes, I need you to help me raise money. Again, they always say that. And I said, well, what about your wife's Hollywood friends and your doctor friends? You raised some money the last time you ran. He says, I promised my wife I wouldn't ask those people again. And I said, well, you're just shooting yourself in the head. He was recruited last minute and had $0, but he had an R next to his name. Folks, I'm telling you, that ain't good enough anymore. We have to have the ability to raise money. We have to have the ability to put together a campaign team, including volunteers, if we're going to be viable. And here's the big problem. Don't start at the top. We need a bench. Run for school board, run for city council, run for the water district or the sewer district. or the school board and try to, you know, one of the things I asked Bobby to do a couple years ago is there was that young guy, the good-looking guy, real estate guy that was running, remember his name?
I don't, but the guy on the west side.
Yeah. So this guy, yeah, I can't remember his name. Anyway, he's a great guy. Worked hard, bought precincts, everything else. Well, he lost, and they went back and looked at how many Republicans didn't vote. So I said, Bobby, we've got to drop a nuclear bomb on this problem. I will contribute money. I want you to publish the name of every Republican in that district in the newspaper that didn't vote. Add up that number and show we would have won if they would have just voted.
Brian Campbell.
Brian Campbell.
Yeah. Wait, attorney.
Yeah.
Brian Campbell.
Anyway, we've got to do something different if we're going to get different results. So there was a guy, good-looking guy, hard-working guy, had you know, just had everything going for him. But not only did the Republicans not donate much money, they didn't even vote for him. You can't win if you don't vote. And the people aren't going to vote in some cases because they gave up hope, but in other cases because they didn't even know. I had somebody tell me this. I voted for Joan because I didn't know who Frank was. Hardcore Republican. And then there was also a hit piece against Frank. It was I'm going to call it an assassination attempt that didn't help. You know, it didn't help. Well, I'm not going to mention names, but the bottom line, a letter went out saying he was a con man, a political con man, and this, that, and the other. And that influenced people as well. I saw that letter get circulated. So there was just one, it was not a comedy of errors, it was a tragedy of errors, one after the other. And now we're going to have to be another 4 years of Joan Hart. And hanging by the skin of our teeth with Roy Lee in the 1st District. Something's got to change, folks. Something's got to change. And you in this room, you're the political insiders. You're the GOP groupies. By virtue of you being here once a month. It starts with you and the Central Committee.
Okay, questions? Everybody?
Andy, real quick, you stole half of my thunder in my question, but do you know the percentage of Section 8 housing in the Santa Barbara area?
No.
You said Lompoc was 30%.
Lompoc's got 30% of all of it.
But I wonder with all the high-density housing that's going on down here now,
Well,
I'm wondering how much of that is...
So, in most of these cases, they have to put in 20% affordable units is the minimum to get the density bonuses. Now, the more affordable units in the project, the more they can build and the less they have to do with regard to parking and all this other stuff. But this the county is trying to push them to do more than 20%. But there's no such thing as free housing. Let me share with you something where they have just cut off their nose in spite of their face. So the number one source of property tax dollars in the county is, discretionary money is property tax dollars. They get their money from property tax, and sales tax, and TOT tax. So this last Tuesday I spoke at the board because they just rubber stamped a fee increase for what's called traffic mitigation fees. Traffic mitigation fees are charged to new development supposedly to deal with congestion relief and road improvements and this, that, and the other. If you wanted to build a 7-Eleven on, let's say on the corner here, a 7-Eleven, 2,000 square foot 7-Eleven, traffic fee $974,000. If you want to build a 3,000 square foot bank with the drive-through, traffic fee $2.4 million. If you want to build a 50,000 square foot shopping center, $5.2 million. Nobody's going to build anything that leads to commercial development, higher taxes, property taxes, sales taxes, TOT taxes, because why are they charging so much? They've got a $527 million maintenance backlog. They've got roads, bridges, buildings, parks, over $500 million in neglected, deferred maintenance. They have borrowed over $400 million to either build buildings, buy equipment, or things like that. They have a $800 million pension deficit. Altogether, $1.7 billion in the hole. If they're demanding developers to build more affordable housing, and Laura Capps actually wants to do it on county property. But they won't get property taxes if they build it on county property. And so they're not staying in their lane, and they're not doing their job. Instead of doing all this stuff with greenhouse gases and climate change, I was in a meeting one time on Zoom, over 20 staffers working on climate change. You know, their pensions, there's a number of people that will retire with over $200,000 a year for the rest of their lives. There's fire. I started a firestorm that Steve Lavanino attacked me on. I simply on Facebook, I was doing these series of articles, did a screenshot of Transparent California, the top salaries and the top pensions. Well, the number one top salary benefit, overtime, and pension was a fire captain, over $600,000 a year. And they said I was attacking fire. I said I was attacking fire and publishing public information on who the top salaries are. And the top pensioners were mostly from the sheriff's department, $250,000 a year. It's unsustainable, but they don't want to talk about it. Bob Nelson is now on the record as Steve Lavanino. We've got the pensions under control. They only have the pensions under control until the next stock market crash. The last time the stock market crashed, they lost over $1 billion. They're still paying it off. So even the people that are, Steve and Bob vote right 90-95% of the time. Got no complaint about that. But they're not fighting on any of these issues. Because what they do, and you'll hear this out of their mouths very often, is they've embraced collegiality. Well, while they have embraced collegiality, our county's going to hell in a handbasket. And my job, I'm just a speed bump. Is all I am. I can't do anything else but tell people like you what's going on and hope you do something about it. And thank you for having me, and sorry for the bad news on the 3rd, but somebody has to say it. Forgive me? Yes.
I'm going on to the national scale. If you're talking about funding, there's an article in the Los Angeles Times about billionaires funding the Democrats, including Wendy Munger, who is the fellow who wanted to build the windowless building at UCSB. Wendy is a Democrat. And right,
here.
it's just waiting in the wings.
So does anybody have a question? Yes. Do you have one?
The question I had, I agree with everything you said about the 3rd district. I thought there was like zero chance that Joan would win outright. And almost for certain, if Frank would win outright, there'd be a runoff. And so what I don't understand is I was told that the voter registration and balance, after getting Iowa Vista out, was only about 4 or 5% Democrat over Republican. And if that's true, how can we not get at least into a runoff when there's a third person siphoning off Democrat?
Well, I don't think if the registration's that close.
That
It's 22,000 Democrats, 14,000 Republicans.
Yeah, I don't think it's as close as 4 or 5.
22,000.
But there's a lot of working class people up there, and working class people, like for instance, Santa Maria 5th District, is mostly Democrat, but they've elected Republicans till kingdom come, right? Because they're working class. They don't have this ideological bent that they have down here and stuff. So it was, you know, it would have been hard to win. And I think maybe if he campaigned, he could have won. I don't know, you know. But the bulk of the blame has to go on him. But the mitigating factors are something we've got to reflect on. We've got to reflect on it. We have to own it. We have to own it and learn from it and do something different in the future. Thank you for having me.
Just real quick, I wanted to clarify, there are 22,000 registered Democrats in the 3rd District and 14,000 registered Republicans. The big hope, of course, was on the no party preference. And just to clarify, the Santa Barbara County Republican Party received about 80,000 to support Frank in his campaign, and they spent it all to try and get Republicans out. The turnout was about 44% for the Democrats and 55% for the Republicans. But it's almost, you know, a fact that there were Republicans who voted for Joan. Joan campaigned very hard up there, and she went on her record and also as an incumbent, and there wasn't enough effort to really kill her record, which Frank had promised to spend $2 to $3 million and spent almost, you know, like $20,000 or $30,000. So that was really tragic. He didn't do what he said he was going to do, and we have the results that we have. So thank you for allowing me to do that. And here we go. Nick's going to do a drawing.
Oh, yeah.